Thank you. Now, good morning. Ah, that sounds good. It is a treat to be here in Austin and exciting to be part of this conference here at South by Southwest. Because Texas, this time of year, is becoming quite the hotbed of ideas. And if you want to see what's happening in culture and technology and education, you now, in March, head south and you head west. Now, I, for one, am especially glad to be here because it's a snowy mess back home in Washington. And beyond the weather, another reason I can safely say we are not in Washington is that our nation's capital definitely does not run under the banner of keeping the city weird. At least not on purpose. But today, I want to talk to you about what we can do in Washington to improve educational opportunities for students across the country. I want to talk to you about the nation's largest educational technology program, a program called E-Rate. It's run by the agency where I work, the Federal Communications Commission, and I want to challenge you to work with me to reboot, reinvigorate, and recharge the E-Rate program, or what I like to call E-Rate 2.0. But before heading boldly into that future, I want to look back for a moment. Not that long ago, but more years than I care to count, I want to talk about when I was in school. When I went to school, there was only the blackboard. This was our common medium, our shared platform for knowledge, introducing new ideas, involved no graphics, gamification, or video. Just the swipe of an eraser and some dusty chalk. There was also the mimeograph or ditto machine. Tests and math sets were printed out in a blotchy purple ink. And that ink had a smell, really a stench, that I would recognize even today in just an instant. There was also the great heft of biology textbooks and stubby guides covering grammar. They weighed down your backpack and they cluttered your locker. And beyond books, multimedia meant grainy film strips with history reenactments that had really lousy production values. So, let's fast forward to the here and now. My children are blissfully not going to know the fine art of clapping together erasers. It's a good thing. And for me, that purple ink and the physical crank of the mimeograph machine was the practical cap on copying and sharing information. But my kids, all they will know is the infinite capacity of digital distribution. And content for them will mean a lot more than just the printed page or a school closet filled with a dusty set of film reels. Because educational texts are being remade and rethought as tablets change the ways we access all forms of media and information. In short, broadband and connected devices are changing every aspect of our lives. Because we live in an age of always-on connectivity. Increased broadband capacity and decreased costs of cloud computing are changing the ways we access and create all content. So many of our social spaces are now virtual. And mobility means we can take the content we consume and create and take it with us anywhere we go. In fact, we are now a nation with more mobile phones than people. It's a curious thing. 1 in 3 adults has a tablet computer, and that number is growing fast. But the most stunning changes are happening with school-aged children. 3/4 of all kids now have access to a mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet. 72% of children under age 8 have used these devices for some kind of media activity. Almost 1 in 5 now do so on a daily basis. And among teenagers, half own their own smartphones. 9 in 10 have used social media, and 95% use the internet regularly. We kid ourselves if we think all of this change is going to stop at the school door. It won't. So if we are smart, we will let it in and wrestle with its real potential and do good things. Because doing anything else will not prepare our students for the world they are going to live in. Already, 50% of jobs today require some kind of digital skills. By the end of the decade, that number is going to be 77%. We do our students no favors if we strand our schools and classrooms in the industrial era. After all, this is the digital age. Other nations recognize this. Countries around the world are wiring their schools with high-speed broadband. In South Korea, 100% of schools are connected to really high-speed broadband. So much so that by 2016, they will be converting to all digital textbooks. In Ireland, all schools this year will be wired for 100 megabits. In Finland, it'll be next year, but they'll be doing exactly the same. And meanwhile, in Turkey and Thailand, the governments are talking to vendors to supply tablet computers to millions of students for a new era of digital learning. There is just no reason for us to settle with the status quo. There's no reason for us to let other nations lead. We can do this. We can make sure that all American students have access to high-speed broadband, no matter who they are, where they live, or where they go to school. So let me step off that soapbox for a minute, leave behind the lofty, and get into some details. I want to talk about the mechanics of E-rate. E-rate, as I mentioned at the outset, is run by the FCC and is the nation's largest education technology program. It helps connect all of our schools and libraries to modern communications and the internet. E-rate support is based on need. That means more funding is available for schools and libraries that serve low-income or rural populations. Now, E-rate is the byproduct of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So think back for a moment to 1996. Big broadband was in its infancy. Dial-up was our online destiny. Everyone here probably called the internet the information superhighway. I know I did. It was a long time ago. And back in 1996, only 14% of our nation's schools had access to the internet. Today, thanks to the support that the E-rate program has provided, that number is 95%. Now that sounds good. It might sound like the E-rate job is done. But nothing could be further from the truth. Because the challenge today is not connection, it's capacity. Too many of our schools that rely on E-rate access the internet at speeds as low as 3 megabits. That is lower than the speed that is now in the average American home. But think about it, in many cases, those schools have 200 times as many users as the average American home. And then think about what that means. It means too many schools do not have the capacity to even offer things like high-definition streaming video. It means that too many schools do not have the ability to use the most innovative digital age teaching tools. And it means too many students will lack the ability to develop the science, technology, engineering, and math or STEM skills that are so essential to compete. But there's also some good news. We're actually doing something about it. At the FCC, we recently started a reform effort to modernize our E-rate system, what I like to call E-rate 2.0. Just like with the evolution of any operating system, we need to take the good that we have, put in place already, build on it, and upgrade it for the future. At the FCC, that means we have a public rulemaking. Last summer, we proposed changes to E-rate, and in doing so, we sought comments and ideas from stakeholders of every stripe. Right now, in Washington, we are processing all these ideas, and there are a lot of them. So candidly, it's taking some time. But when we finish, we need to take this program that Congress authorized almost 2 decades ago and get it in good shape for the broadband era. Because if we keep on just keeping on with the E-rate program we are going to miss a huge opportunity. The opportunity to bring digital age learning to all of our schools. Now, I think we can do it, so let me talk about how. You're probably familiar with the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So let me move on down the line and introduce you to the 3 S's of E-rate reform. Speed, simplify, and spending smart. And I admit maybe that's 4, but then again, the 3 R's were never actually all R's, so I think I can take some liberties. But that aside, I want to talk about these 3 things and how we have to focus on them now if we want to put E-rate 2.0 in place. First, speed. If you are a school and you want to run the most up-to-date educational software, simply put, you need high-speed, high-capacity broadband. But a survey from Project Tomorrow found that only 15% of schools believe they have the bandwidth they need for instructional purposes. Think about that number for a minute. 85% of our schools do not believe they have the bandwidth they need for instructional purposes. I think that's chilling. And it's a real problem because we moved from a world where a connected computer lab down the hall is nice to have to a world where high-speed broadband to the classroom is need to have. So let me put some numbers on this. I want to tell you what I mean by really high-speed broadband. In the near term, we need to have 100 megabits per 1,000 students to every school. And in the long term, by the end of the decade, I think we should have 1 gigabit per 1,000 students to every school. Now, I call those goals dream likely and dream big. But I think we can do it. And more than that, I think if we adopt these kind of goals, we are going to send a strong signal to educational markets. Because by making more bandwidth available at nationwide scale, we can foster new opportunities for creative content, for new teaching tools, for new devices, everywhere. Plus, the spillover effect from bringing broadband to anchor institutions like schools is huge. Because simply bringing these kinds of speeds to schools makes it incrementally less expensive to deploy high-speed broadband to homes and businesses nearby. Now, to meet these goals, we're going to have to do things differently. And I think that means the FCC needs to collect better data from each of our applicants about what capacity they have and what capacity they need. That way, we can fine-tune our efforts over time and actually achieve these goals. Second, simplify. The E-rate program is simply too complicated. This is a program that can be about blazing a path for broadband in the digital age. So why does it have such a long and messy paper trail? It's just become too difficult and expensive for schools to navigate our process, especially the low-income and rural schools that are most in need. That's just not right. So I want us to make a strenuous effort to reduce the bureaucracy associated with E-rate. To this end, I'd like to see multi-year applications. As small as that sounds, the impact could be really big. If applications were due every other year, that would cut the administrative cost of applying in half. I also would like to see more incentives for consortia in the application process. When schools work together, they can navigate the process together and benefit from more cost-effective bulk buying. Moreover, by encouraging consortia to include nearby schools and districts that lack really high-speed connections, we can use local forces to help bring everyone along. That respects the local tradition of education in this country, but also helps us reach a national goal of getting 99% of students connected to high-speed broadband in the next 5 years. I think we can do it, and I think greater use of consortia is the ticket. A simpler process should also mean greater transparency during the review process for E-rate applicants. Critics have charged that our existing process is a bit opaque, and they're right. Beyond that, we have to welcome other ideas from E-rate applicants that can simplify the process and reduce the bureaucracy of the program. Now, the last S or two is spending smart. We need to spend our limited E-rate dollars intelligently. That means better accounting practices that the FCC has already identified that will help free up more E-rate broadband support during the next 2 years. Spending smart has to go beyond accounting changes, though. Because on a long-term basis, we need to make sure that all E-rate support is focused on high-speed broadband. To that end, the time has come to phase down the estimated $600 million this program now spends every year on outdated services like paging. If we reduce this kind of expense over time, we can free up more funds for high-capacity services. But spending smart also means that we have to own up to the fact that inflation has cut the purchasing power of this program. The E-rate program was sized and capped at $2.25 billion annually back in 1998. 1998 was when less than 1% of American households had access to the internet at any speed above dial-up. 1998 was when gas was just over $1 a gallon. It was a long time ago. I think we need to fix this now. At a minimum, we need to restore the purchasing power of this program by bringing back what inflation has taken away. Because when the cap was put in place, and between that time and some adjustments we made in 2010, that adds up to nearly $1 billion. But I think we have to go beyond that and actually talk about what more we need to meet the goal of connecting 99% of schools in 5 years. Because when it comes to bringing broadband to our schools, the rest of the world is on course to do this. We can let them outspend us, out-educate us, and out-achieve us. Or we can be courageous and do something about it. One further thought about equity and opportunity. Beyond the S's of speed, simplify, and spending smart, I think a reformed E-rate speaks to essential issues of equity and access in education. Today, 3 out of 10 households do not have broadband access. And that number is stubborn. It's not changing much over time. Think about what it means to be a student in one of those households, typically low income, often rural. It means just getting basic homework done is difficult. It means applying for a scholarship on something like a mobile phone is challenging. But by bringing broadband to all of our schools, we will be making digital age opportunities available for all. And that matters. So there you have it. E-rate is a little-known program that has done a lot of good. But we can do so much more. With a reformed E-rate, or E-rate 2.0, we can extend the reach of broadband in our schools. We can expand the range of educational content. We can harness digital and mobile platforms and teach in new and exciting ways. In short, we can seize the good in new technology and prepare all of our children for success in the 21st century. And as a policymaker and a parent, I think that's something worth fighting for. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, big, small, formal or informal.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Ben Kramer, Director of Education for KLRU, the PBS station here in Austin, and a former school administrator. So we've had both I've experienced firsthand both the pleasures and the frustrations of E-rate. My question for you is, given the focus on out-of-school time learning, summer learning loss, et cetera, do you foresee the E-rate process including non-traditional schooling settings, potential to bring in informal learning centers and other places that can help bolster these critical times?
That's a really good question. Obviously, the entire nature of school is changing. The idea that you sit simply in a classroom for a fixed number of hours is increasingly at odds with a whole bunch of online learning experiences that are combining in our kids' schooling today. One of the challenges we face is that this is a law from the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I think it's fair to say that we didn't envision a lot of these things in 1996. So our agency has the liberty of working under that law, but is also constrained by it. And so we'll have to take a hard look at what school means under the law and educational institutions. I accept your point that it's evolving. And candidly, for this type of activity to be successful, we're going to have to first think about the schools, but we're also going to have to think about the students at home.
Commissioner, I'm Jamie Osborne. I work with Region 6, Education Service Center here in Texas. I'm located in Huntsville, which is about 2.5 hours from here, and I applaud your efforts to improve E-rate. We work with approximately 60 school districts in the state of Texas, so the idea of a consortium is a very positive one for us. It would make a lot of sense. However, I'm concerned that there's an urban-centric vision of E-rate in Washington, D.C. Here in Texas, for example, my area north of Houston represents a broad geographical range, and the factors that we have to deal with in terms of the rural spaces and the telco reach into these rural spaces is making the issue not a pricing matter, but a physical connectivity matter. And I applaud your effort to bring rural broadband out, because we're going to be sending a letter to you tomorrow for that rural broadband program. My question has to do with how I believe it was my understanding that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 was designed to make the incentive for telcos to improve their reach throughout America, not just in the country. And I think that the telcos have obviously decided to spend their money in the urban centers where the profit is. What can we do what can you as the FCC do to help the telcos get to fund places where they've not gone into previously into this next 5 years? I've got a district not 45 minutes from Austin that can do no better than a T1. I got news for you. That's going to be a big problem to get somebody who wants to lay down fiber into that kind of area.
You've hit on a lot of really big and important issues. Let me start with universal service policy in the aftermath of the Telecommunications Act of 96, which is a big regulatory way of trying to get really high-speed broadband, really good quality communication services to every community in this country. Like you note, it is more cost-effective for private sector providers to serve urban areas that have high populations. That's why the Telecommunications Act of 1996 set up a high-cost system, whereby the agency where I work distributes funds to providers to incentivize them to deploy to more rural areas and make more equivalent services available in both rural and urban areas. I will be the first to admit that that program is not perfect, and we are working on improving it. I think that's really important when it comes to rural deployment. By the way, not just for schools, but for homes and businesses in rural communities too. I also think the E-rate program can be a stimulant to make that happen. If we decide that we want to have capacity goals and a certain speed available in every school in this country, we are going to have to decide to make some choices within that program to make sure that those that are far behind get the support they need to get up to that baseline. And I think the combination of those two things could be potent, but I recognize that we still have some work to do when it comes to making sure that these types of services reach rural America.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Carter. I'm the Director of Adult Education Initiatives at Digital Promise. And I wanted to just get up and thank you for acknowledging, and I appreciate the question about informal education settings. One of the things that I've been observing at this conference is there's a lot of interest in adult education, and I think that libraries in particular are a really critical part of this program, and for a lot of adult learners and families, that's a really critical piece, and I just think it's important to, again, applaud the fact that it's not just schools that this program serves, but also libraries. But again, I just wanted to ask you your thoughts a little bit more about the possibility of expanding into other kinds of school settings, including adult education.
Good question. I think, again, we're a little constrained by the law, which contemplates really a K through 12 school setting. It doesn't contemplate things like informal learning centers and community colleges, for instance. I don't anticipate that there'll be a change in the law anytime soon, so I think that that is a restraint on on us changing this system that much. But I do think the point you make about libraries is really key. This is actually a program that supports schools and libraries. I focus my discussion on schools today because it's South by Southwest EdU. When they do the library version, we'll probably have the same version of the speech, but talking about libraries. But libraries are an absolutely critical place for people to go to get information, to do their homework, to fill out job applications, interact with the government. 80% of the Fortune 500 companies right now require you to apply for a job online. They don't take paper applications. Libraries are becoming an essential first stop for people to get jobs, to interact with healthcare providers, service providers, do their homework. Schools, we can't leave them behind in E-Rate 2.0. Libraries have to be a part of the picture.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm Todd Groves. I'm on the school board in West Contra Costa Unified School District out in California. We recently had our Tier 2, an application for Tier 2 funding denied because of lack of funding in the program. And I'm just wondering, are there any way that might be refunded at some point in the future, or?
Well, I can't speak to the individual application because you've caught me on that, and I can't.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't tell you that I'm going to know. But I can tell you we do have a problem. We
Yeah.
set aside about $2.25 billion every year. That's probably up closer to $2.4 billion at the moment. And the demand for this program is always twice as large as the supply. I mean, that's a statement there and of itself, that every school wants to make sure that they're connected, that they get online, that their students have access for the possibilities of one-to-one device learning. And frankly, under our existing system, which was sized in 1996, 1998, we don't have funds sufficient to do that. So we're going to face some hard choices in the future about how we continue to prioritize within this system. But like I also mentioned, I think we should spend more money because I think the rest of the world is doing that, and we can't fall behind.
Hello, I'm Steve Munez, a technology teacher here in Del Valley in Austin. One of the questions I have is for E-Rate for our district. What it means is, I know when I got hired 5 years ago, my teacher computer had Windows 95 on it and had less than, 256 megabytes of memory on it. With E-Rate, we were able to buy virtual systems and put them in classrooms, get new teacher computers, projector setups, and things like that. However, we still do not have anything close to a 5-to-1 in the classroom for students. So I know we're talking heavily about broadband, but what are they looking at for E-Rate as far as getting devices in classrooms for districts that just don't have money?
This is a program that focuses on communications capacity, which is what the FCC has jurisdiction on. So it's not a program that ultimately funds devices. And I realize with school budgets being what they are, that is a hard thing to ask schools to do and set aside funding for. But I also have a little bit of optimism about it, because we could ask every school district in this country to do this on their own, or we can make the announcement that we're doing it nationwide at scale. And by making that announcement, I have confidence that we're sending a signal to markets that are going to produce more low-cost devices, that are going to make it more feasible for more districts to purchase devices that are different than the tablets we know today, but are actually geared towards students and schools, because we're creating a very large market. And it's my hope that there are going to be innovative folks who pour into that and make those kind of things possible.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nathan Martin with Digital Learning Now. So first, thank you so much for your leadership in this. Since last year and since this process started, we've so appreciated it at the foundation and the larger group of education partners, your leadership in trying to help keep moving this forward. We do believe this is critical, but I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit. You talked about how the definition of learning is changing and it's expanding, and we recognize that it's hard to figure out how do you fund kids at home and how do you fund learning in that capacity. How do you see the role of E-Rate in helping to facilitate
the role of state virtual schools or online schools. So, in Florida, there's a great virtual school program that's serving numerous kids. That's outside of that traditional definition, but it's becoming part of the traditional definition in this world. What do you see as the role of E-rate in helping to support virtual schools?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for everything that you do at your organization. I know you're big champions of upgrading and improving this program, and I really appreciate that. I just actually spoke in Florida with the head of the Florida Virtual Schools, and it's amazing what they're doing. They're creating opportunities for students in the state that have nothing to do with the four walls of a school. And it is frankly very challenging for us in Washington to figure out how we take this program that was built into a law from 1996 and make it work in an environment that is changing so fast. I'm not sure the law gives us sufficient flexibility to do that, but I think we have to start putting our heads together and thinking creatively about it, because the ways that I learned in school are definitely not the ways my kids are going to learn, and increasingly more kids are going to access different types of classes, different types of academic environments by participating completely or only on maybe a class basis in those kind of schools.
Thank you.
Hi, Brent Red from the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium. We are learning that a lot of the challenge is not only the bandwidth to the school, but actually the on-premises network capacity and so on. And that's twofold. One is getting the right hardware and network infrastructure within the school, and the other is having the expertise that you need to maintain and operate that kind of infrastructure. So one option we've been advocating schools consider is actually seeking that as a service. In other words, a service to maintain and operate the in-school infrastructure, similar to how they procure bandwidth. What I'm wondering is E-rate applicable to the on-premise networking, and does it make a difference how they procure it, whether it's as hardware or as a service?
Yeah, we're dealing with a lot of those issues right now. I think that one of the challenges with our last set of reforms on E-rate is we were still thinking about how do we bring broadband to the school door. We now have to think about how we use Wi-Fi and LANs to bring it to the classroom, because the era of having your students march down once a week to the computer lab, where they all sat before equipment that came in big, bulk, shrink-wrapped packages, is not the one that I'm talking about. We have to actually wire our schools for one-to-one device learning. I think that puts a new priority on wireless LANs, and we're trying to figure out how to incorporate that into our system. And as far as maintenance, that is a huge issue for schools who are just, trying to figure out how to educate their students, and now suddenly they have to become technical experts too. That's a big challenge, especially if you're a small district or a rural district, or you don't have the resources to hire lots of people to explain this stuff to you. It's why I think the use of consortia could be so powerful, because by working together, you can get the discounts that are associated with bulk buying, you can get the administrative expertise that comes with someone knowing how to navigate the process. And more importantly, you can work together and develop technical expertise in a local way that can probably help schools navigate all of this.
Raleigh Cole, Broadband Communities Magazine. In the past, before you were commissioner, there were lots of charges that grants were heavily weighted to services from incumbents and almost none going to those who would purchase capital equipment from non-incumbents like fixed wireless. As part of spending smarter, what are you doing to expand the technology options you're willing to consider?
We have a process that the initiated will know is, I think, our Form 470, 471 process, whereby schools put out bids and they describe what they're looking for. The idea is through a request for proposal process, we get a certain amount of transparency, and that schools can evaluate bids from traditional and non-traditional providers alike. I will agree with you that they might have been more highly weighted towards traditional providers. But I'm hoping we can improve that process and make it more transparent what different schools spend in different locations, so that we can get schools and application providers to think about ways of using different types of providers to provide these services.
Thank you again for your remarks thus far. Jeff Fletcher with CETA. Can you talk to us a little bit about the best way for some of these folks to weigh in on these issues and to provide suggestions and options for you and the commission to consider?
You know, I think that's a great question. We hear in Washington from the same community of usual stakeholders who are present year in and year out for E-rate conversations and broadband conversations. But I think when we're talking about E-rate going straight to the classroom, the most powerful thing is to hear from people who are really in the classroom and really in schools. We have an open docket at the FCC. If you send us a letter, we will read it. We have a community of staff there who are working hard on this, and if you want to set up a phone call with them, I will be happy to help facilitate it. And then because it's the FCC, my phone usually works. So I would invite you even to call me or email me, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with the people who are working on this. I think this is really important, and I think we will do ourselves a disservice if we only listen to the usual characters in Washington. I think it's people who are in the front lines in classrooms and administrators in schools and people who are managing all this technological change in all of our school systems that we need to hear from most. We don't always make it easy for you to do that, so I would encourage you to simply reach out to me and I will put you in touch with people who will listen to your ideas, because if you're on the front lines, I think they're always worth listening to. I haven't exhausted you yet? Okay.
Hi, my name is Ali Arsan. I'm the CEO of Edlio, and I'm on the other side, one of the service providers for schools and school districts nationwide. We work with more than 2,000 schools. And we always hear gossip in changes in the E-rate program, and from your speech, I was under the impression that there is a focus change towards more broadband.
Yes.
And can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what we should be as service providers focusing on? For example, we focus on providing software through these broadband channels, and we don't mind the changes, but we want to know a little bit more so we can prepare.
Anybody who provides service that is going to benefit from broadband, which includes more software, is going to benefit from having a program that is more focused on broadband. I mean, I think it's just crazy we're sitting here in 2014 and we have a program that still is providing support for paging. We have to upgrade this so that this is a program that's just about broadband service. That'll take some time. I think we have to respect school districts that rely on these funds, and we have to phase things out. But the more that we make this program focused on high bandwidth services, the more opportunities there'll be for anybody providing educational software, educational content, devices. I think that's going to infuse a whole level of innovation in our schools that is just really, really exciting.
Okay, I'm short. I'm Denise Jackson. I am a teacher in Wimberley, Texas, right down the road. I've watched E-rate and been part of filing on E-rate for many years, since '96. And my concern is that E-rate supports us putting in the current technology, but then that is outdated. So how is Washington, how is the FCC working with the innovations and promoting those and educating so that we're not, in my mind, wasting a lot of dollars on outdated technology?
That's a really good question. And frankly, it's something that happens in technology in a whole host of environments, not just schools. We know it's so important, we spend a lot of money on it, and then how do we make sure that we don't get ourselves stuck in just current thinking? I think that's why refocusing E-rate from a whole range of services simply onto bandwidth is the way to go. Because in the future, everything we do, from our conversations to our content, are just going to flow over digital ones and zeros. And as the agency, we should just be focused on making those pipes so big as to not be as specific about the services, and then give you the luxury to divvy them up and figure out what you want to do with them and how you want to upgrade them over time. So I think refocusing the program just on really big bandwidth is a really good way to try to help manage that problem.
So I'm going to speak as loud as I can, but I have a follow-up to that then, and it is that, are you looking at technologies out there with the innovators and publishing that information out to us as our source of where is the most innovative and stretchable options? You know? So because if you put in wiring today, then big tomorrow is
Yeah.
we're not going to have it.
Yes, we do have an eligible services list that we work with. I can't tell you that that's a terrific tool. I think it is more constraining than liberating for a lot of the schools. So again, I think the whole point is to refocus on bandwidth and then give you the opportunities to try to figure out what cool and creative things you can do with it. We can't be in a position where we're promoting certain types of services or private sector companies, for instance. But I think the possibilities of having a really big pipe into your school are things that schools will explore over time and identify the best ways to use. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I appreciate all your really good questions.